Welcome to the Brainy8 Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rockstar. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant, trainer, and MVP, David Giller.
In this episode, I interview Justice Sikakane, Certified Salesforce Administrator at Cargill, based in Minnesota. Justice has earned over 100 badges on Trailhead, which is an impressive feat by itself. Justice is also an emerging speaker at multiple community-led events. In this episode, Justice shares his valuable insights and wisdom on managing the Salesforce landscape, and he doesn't hesitate to turn the tables on me and ask me a couple of interesting questions along the way. Justice Sikakane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Looking forward to being here on this great podcast. I've heard a few great episodes, and I'm looking forward to participating myself.
Thank you. So when I thought of including you in the podcast, I thought of including you for a bunch of reasons. First of all, because we're friends. Second of all, you're very involved in the Salesforce community. You always have things to share, whether it's insights, wisdom, funny stories, etc. But also, similar to my own background, you are currently working in a larger organization that's leveraging Salesforce. And I think there are some particularly interesting nuances that come about when you're involved in a Salesforce configuration in a large organization where you have many different departments, divisions, some politics, different opinions on how to do things from a sales, marketing, IT perspective that are not necessarily the same for a smaller organization.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, in fact, the organization I work for is Cargill, largest privately held organization in the U.S. So it's, at the time before we went through an organizational change a few years back, I think now maybe a year or two, we had over 70 business units within various platforms. So a platform could comprise of numerous business units. And I would say at the time, don't quote me, but 30 of those business units at the time when I first came into Cargill, which was April of 2013, had Salesforce CRM Sales Cloud. So a lot of diversity and different functions, business units around Salesforce. So yeah, from the perspective of being able to learn, there was a common phrase that I associated with the beginning of my career, and it was baptism by fire. Working in a small organization, I think there's a lot of opportunities to take on training and kind of a handheld approach. But working for a larger organization, it was kind of one of those, here's the project, here's the initiative, and then just kind of get your hands dirty and learn and try to provide value in terms of, as we think about, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to this is aware of this, but Salesforce is a tool to enable business processes. So it was all about learning how I could ensure that our current functionality, current state was enabling business processes so that we had sales folks leveraging the full capability of our Salesforce implementation at that time.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you first got introduced into Salesforce as a tool and your initial impressions.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was recruited by Cargill to come in as a systems analyst. So at the time, I was supporting a portfolio of legacy applications. Those applications, based on the strategic roadmap of those applications, were migrating into SAP. So the number of applications I was supporting over time started to go from X amount to 1 to 2. And at that point in time, my supervisor came to me and said, "Hey, we've had this Salesforce.com implementation in Cargill. We're starting to add a little bit more focus, more resources to this implementation, and we want you to get trained, learn about it, so that you could start supporting our customers," which at the time I was in IT, which is a function, considered a function in Cargill we were supporting our various businesses that were on Salesforce and kind of aligning that strategic intent of how Salesforce is being used and how we could better support our customers.
Mm-hmm.
So they sent me to a training in San Francisco, 5-day training, Intro to Object-Oriented Programming, learning Ep6, led by Leah McGowan-Hare.
Oh, wow.
With a phenomenal trainer, by the way. So that was my first exposure, first lesson, first anything as it related to Salesforce in a formal capacity. And I came back after that 5-day training and was able to provide value to our stakeholders and our businesses in terms of having an elevated sense and understanding of Salesforce.com, its ecosystem, and the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And started taking on different projects and working with different individuals, collaborating with different businesses. And then there was a sizable project that I took on, which I think took me from, humbly speaking, took me from being what would be considered as a novice to being relatively comfortable with understanding Salesforce. And that was around permissions, profiles, delegated administration, so just out-of-the-box functionality that I got really familiar with in terms of supporting our user base. So I think what's referred to in the community, I think I'd be referred to as what they call an accidental admin.
That's right.
We kind of stumbled into it, right?
We could be in therapy together.
Right. One of the other things too I would say on that is, it's interesting because early on I thought after that training, I needed to know how to do my job effectively. And I really took it on myself to try to figure it out in hours and hours of time. And I would run into barriers that I just could not figure out. I mean, some of these breakthroughs take years of experience rather than 60, 70 hours a week, right? So one of the things I did is I went out to LinkedIn. And in fact, that's how we ended up connecting, David.
That's right.
As I saw you on LinkedIn and the different tips, tricks, blog posts, very consistent, very active, and I was able to connect with you and just learn, some basic fundamentals that you were able to share with me. They kind of somewhat opened my mind up to, okay, there's other folks out there that are doing what I'm doing, bigger organizations and smaller organizations. But it wouldn't be a year until after our first conversation that I would be exposed to the wonderful Twitter community. So you were definitely the first from the Salesforce community that I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But,
I broke you in. You're like, who is this guy that keeps posting on LinkedIn? And then you went to Twitter and said, oh my God, he just doesn't stop. Does he have a life or what? Everyone says that about me. It's fine. I got used to it.
Well, it's helpful. Tips and tricks and hacks.
Yeah. So tell us a little.
Kind of how I got it.
Tell us a little bit more about your involvement in the Salesforce community, because from that initial interaction that you and I had on LinkedIn to migrating over to Twitter, you've gone way further in terms of your involvement in the Salesforce community. That's not only virtual, but also in person and at different events and speaking. And why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we first interacted, I can't recall what year, but about a year later, which is a year from today, April actually, I got on Twitter. And the reason why I got on Twitter is I was still kind of hovering LinkedIn and just seeing what folks in the Salesforce community, domestically and internationally, were talking about. And around this time, a post had been published by Hamza Habib out of London around the opportunity for increased representation of minorities, specifically blacks, that work for Salesforce, now the fourth largest software company in the world. And I heard through LinkedIn that he would be speaking or be participating anyways at the Wit and Diversity call. Not only that, I saw on LinkedIn as well that Leah McGowan-Hare, my former instructor for Salesforce, would be the keynote speaker of this With Diversity call led by Shauna Hughes out of Minnesota and Toya Gatewood. So immediately when I said, oh, Leah's going to be speaking, I haven't seen her in a while, haven't heard from her in a while, I have to hear what she's going to talk about. One, maybe, it could be something that helps my journey, but two, this would be my opportunity to give back and share that the learning experience I had from Leah was significant, and I would be able to demonstrate that by talking about my experiences on the call if presented the opportunity. So I get on the call that evening, I think it was 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, so I'm on the call. Leah's sharing her story. Hamza chimes in, and he's well respected within the community for his contributions and his increased knowledge both of Salesforce and generally speaking as you think about the industry. And my time came to chime in and give Leah feedback in terms of the measurable impact she had on my growth and my career and its aspirations. And that was great. It was received well. Got to talk with Shauna, Toya, a few other individuals that are allies that were also on the call. But at the end of the call, this is really funny, Shauna says, she, maybe not at the end of the call, but leading towards the end of the call, she pings in the group chat there, Justice, what's your Twitter handle? I'm thinking to myself, Twitter handle? Aren't we all professionals? I thought, I'm the millennial here. I thought Twitter was like, kids younger than me were using Twitter or something. But funny story short, I created Twitter moments after because I find out Hamza's on there, Shauna's on there, Toya's on there, David Giller, you're on there. Everyone's on there. And it became an obsession, David. I mean, I went from just kind of skimming through to starting to follow a lot of people. People were following me back. I got immersed into numerous Twitter groups, DM messages, I think it's more technically called. But yeah, I mean, that was almost a year ago today that I first got on Twitter. And a lot of the breakthroughs I've had in the community have been through Twitter. So whether it's collaborating, connecting with an Adam Olashansky from the Bay Area or Daniel Peters, Twitter has kind of been this nexus for Salesforce admins, developers, evangelists globally. Right? I've had conversations with Tony Profit on Twitter. I've had conversations with a range and plethora of different people with different backgrounds, different experiences, but all have the same love and passion for Salesforce. And from that, I was the opportunity to meet Eric Dreshfield. I would consider this part of my journey a turning point in my Salesforce career. So Eric Dreshfield was going to be in Minnesota to attend his daughter's graduation from the alma mater in which I attended Mankato State University. So I saw him out through Twitter, obviously, and we coordinated offline, connected, met at a local restaurant, talked for a bit. He shared with me his inspiring story, his career, and how he's achieved so much over an extended amount of time, both with Salesforce and even prior to Salesforce. But that is where I learned about this conference, Midwest Dreaming. And long story short, that would be the conference that I would first be presented with an opportunity to professionally speak and demonstrate my level of understanding on Salesforce acquired over the last year and a half, 2 years, call it. And from that opportunity, I'll be very transparent with you. I've been invited to speak at French Touch Streaming. Phil Walton from the community recognized me as a top 25 individual to meet while in Paris. I got to speak at Dreamforce this past year. And not even just Salesforce, David. I've delivered numerous keynote addresses at schools and different formats about different subject matters. And I would say, long story short, the Salesforce community has empowered and enabled me to really step into being comfortable with myself and my confidence on what I know in my subject matter. And I've been compelled to give back at every opportunity I get. So whether that's volunteering my time or what have you.
That's absolutely incredible. It opened up so many doors for you because what started off really tapping into a network to develop your skill set and give you the confidence from a technology perspective has broadened way further to pursue friendships and just other initiatives that are in an ancillary way related to that technology, that platform, and at the same time developing your speaking skills, talents, abilities, and giving you the confidence to be a keynote speaker.
Yeah, it's been humbling, and I think you mentioned something that is kind of big. You know, we hear this, we just heard this term at Dreamforce. It was used quite a bit, and that term Ohana.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, obviously being entrenched in the corporate realm, David, obviously you're experienced with this as well. There is always going to be those series of key buzzwords, which are essentially just buzzwords for the sake of being buzzwords, right?
Right.
You hear them in water cooler conversations, you hear them in conference room meetings, they're just buzzwords. But Ohana's kind of taken an interesting turn in terms of it's a buzzword, but at the same time it resonates with anyone that considers themselves a Salesforce Ohana. I've made a lot of great friends. Benjamin Balapiu, Stuart Deal, Amy, and these individuals have done a lot of things to help support me in my career, personally and professionally,
right?
In ways that you would never imagine for people who have not known each other for longer than 15 minutes, right? So it's, you know, James Chen is another guy that I find great inspiration from. You know, he put his head down, self-taught, self-educated, you know, 5 certs in like 4 or 5 months. Now he's a Salesforce developer for Map Anything. But it's interesting because when he was working to acquire his first cert, he was reaching out to Amy, myself, you know, just one-on-one offline.
Right.
And, hey, can you help me? I'm trying to skill myself up with preparing to be qualified for the Salesforce admin cert. And now you look at him, it's like he has 4 more certs than I do. But he's still coming, you know, he was coming to me at the time for help. And it's like, now he's a Salesforce developer and just killing it. But that's the humility you get when you take a look at the Salesforce Ohana.
Yeah. And not only that, most of the people that you're even referencing are in different time zones.
Oh, yes.
So it's not like we're talking about just meeting people who happen to be in the area. Like, okay, lucky enough, I'm in the New York City area, so certainly not all, but many of the people that I interact with, they're within the general region, so I get to see them often. But here you're talking, you know, even the people that you mentioned, they're scattered all over the place.
Oh yeah, to your point. The WIT diversity call I referenced in which I met Hamza virtually, we're all on the call and, you know, different time zones, but in Hamza's time zone, it's 2-3 in the morning, right? This is a guy that's married with kids.
Right.
And you see that level of dedication and willingness to contribute with asking for nothing in return, and it's inspiring. And then with you, I mean, just before as we were logistically, you know, going through the logistics of planning this call for this Skype meet, sorry, not Skype, for this podcast meeting, I shot you a text on the side, you know, in the interest of transparency, and just said, hey, 2 p.m. Central Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time, right?
Right.
So it's not like we're all on the same zip code, area code, but yeah, it's truly a beautiful thing. It really is.
And we all make it work.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. Yeah. But yeah, there's, you know, it's interesting. The New York area must be, to your point, it must be a significant amount of folks in the Salesforce community because you guys have 2 user groups out there, right?
There are actually many user groups. So yeah.
Wow. So even more than 2.
Well, my personal involvement is primarily with 2, the New York City user group as well as the Northern New Jersey user group. But there actually are many other user groups in the area. So there's Women in Tech, there's the nonprofit user groups, there's Pardot user groups. Westchester user group. So I started up the Northern New Jersey user group, but New Jersey is quite large, and there's the New Jersey user group, Philadelphia user group, Long Island user group.
What do you guys get, typically speaking, in attendance at these user groups?
They do
That's the one
vary.
you participated in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with the New York City user group, I would say that typically it's somewhere above 160, somewhere between 160 to 200 people typically attend on a monthly basis. There have been times where we had 300 or more people attending. There have been times where we had 60 to 80 people attend. But usually it's somewhere between 160 to 200 people. The Northern New Jersey user group, I would say, ranges anywhere from 50 to about 100 people attending.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And very energetic people usually participate. Even if people walk in, very often we have the user group meetings in the evening. Some people are a little wiped out, say after work.
Yeah.
But usually the user group leaders are very energetic people. So not only myself, but the other user group leaders for both user groups are typically full of energy, and that energy builds upon itself. The enthusiasm, just electricity starts to just generate from within the room as people are coming in and chatting about, hey, how's work going, or how's that project that we talked about last time, how's the job hunt going for you, and the energy just continues to build. And it definitely feels like a party, even though we're going through it. We're talking about like best practices or new features or how to solve common problems in Salesforce, but the energy in the room is definitely like a party. It's very cool. I'll tell you, even as a user group leader, very often I'll look at my calendar and it might be 2, 3 in the afternoon, and I'm thinking, oh man, I got to get out of here soon. I got to wrap up stuff to get to the user group meeting. Start rolling my eyes. How do I juggle all of these things? And once I walk into the room, everything that I just described, I guess I'm contributing to part of that feel, part of that tone, but I also get encompassed in it as well. And by the time I'm leaving and I'm heading home, yeah, I feel like I just left the party with a whole lot of friends, and I don't regret for a
Yeah.
second.
No, I've seen the pictures shared of whether it's you taking a selfie of the entire room,
Right.
or other folks sharing pictures within these user groups and hashtagging. You definitely, even in these still frames, you can see the excitement. You guys are talking about exciting and new things. There's
Yep.
collaboration in the room. It's definitely one of those user groups that next time I'm in the New York area, for whatever reason, I'm gonna have to share my schedule.
Absolutely.
Aligned with hopefully attending one of these user groups.
We would
Awesome.
love to have you. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it would be great.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about any example on how you've leveraged the Salesforce platform to solve a particular problem.
Yeah. So I can think of a couple different examples that come to mind. Mine might be a little bit unconventional from probably the other responses you might have received.
Mm-hmm.
But we recently in Minnesota started off Salesforce Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
So Kristen, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. Don't want to butcher it. Sorry, Kristen, if you're listening. Kristen came to me about, I can't even remember, but she came to me and had this idea to start up Salesforce Saturdays from Minnesota, for which I agreed and said I would support her in any way or capacity that I can or could. And part of the reason why that was, David, was I saw the value in what would come if we kicked off the Salesforce Saturdays,
Mm-hmm.
because if anybody who knows me, whether it's Ben or Cash, Jennifer Lee, the process queen, I'm no stranger to connecting with these guys on the side and saying, hey, I need you to help me figure this out.
Right.
And I guess my point is with Salesforce Saturdays, what you're doing is you're bringing a collective group of individuals into one location to talk, share tips, hacks, tricks, challenges, success stories that will more than likely enable or equip one of those individuals in attendance with them being able to either be more comfortable in their role as an admin or a developer, or maybe it's an opportunity to seek a new opportunity with an organization that's local to the area of that Salesforce Saturday group. But coming back full circle, the Salesforce.com platform, it's a platform that is, one, declarative, two, quite straightforward, three, gives you an opportunity to learn the platform, understand the ecosystem, and then share that knowledge that you've acquired in a very declarative way with other individuals. So having user groups, Salesforce Saturday groups, you're able to gauge different experiences and knowledge levels of different folks who've been utilizing the Salesforce platform, and then you can tap into that. And I think that is the secret of the Salesforce community. Mike Gerhold interviewed me on his Button Click Admin podcast with Jillian Bruce just before Dreamforce 16, and one of the questions in the Lightning Challenge was, hey, what is a word that you would associate with Salesforce? I think the Salesforce platform. And I responded back and said unique, right? There wasn't an opportunity to say why, but that's exactly why, is that you can look at any other CRM tool functionality, you can look at other applications, technology, ERPs, what have you, and you won't find a community that you see that is the Salesforce community. That's all based on leveraging the Salesforce.com platform.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, it's been inspiring, and we've had a lot of help. Kristen and I have had help from Randy. She's another local Minnesota Salesforce evangelist in the area. We've even had Stephanie Herrera, who I'm sure you're aware of, who I believe founded Salesforce Saturdays. I think, generally speaking, just founded Salesforce Saturdays.
Really?
Ronaldo Mayo was a great help and assistant while we were trying to kick off Salesforce Saturdays, and it's been great. I don't know what more else to add to that, but it's been great.
Cool stuff. And by the way, I will include a link to the meetup site for Salesforce Saturdays in the show notes. So for anyone who's listening, just check out the show notes and you'll see a link if you're interested in exploring it further.
That would be great. Thanks, David.
Sure. So tell me of the various apps that are on the App Exchange. Which two would you select as your favorite and why?
That's a great question, and I feel a lot of people are going to be shocked with my response. I'm not too big into the App Exchange. And I don't mean that in a way that I don't think the App Exchange doesn't provide value for providing different approaches for achieving different needs or asks of your users on Salesforce.com. I think just a lot of what we have done, or what I have done in terms of engineering solutions in Salesforce, has either been declarative or it's just been custom.
Right.
Obviously, we do use different, add-on tools. So Salesforce for Outlook is a tool that's been used within our numerous instances of Salesforce and Cargill today. But don't get me wrong, we're definitely using apps from the App Exchange. I'm just not too involved directly with a lot of those apps. Actually, one that I might mention now that I think of is escaping me. Are you familiar with First Rain? Yeah. So First Rain is an app.
Yep.
That we've used, that I've actively been involved in, but obviously when you think about Salesforce Lightning Experience enabled with Spring 17, you'll have account insights available, and you have opportunity insights, and that's essentially what First Rain serves its purpose to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say maybe account insights just based on historically the level of involvement I've had with it within my employer today. But outside of that, I know Cheryl Feldman and I think a few other individuals. I can't think off the top of my head. Oh, Lena, former user group leader for the Twin Cities, have a number of apps that have been very beneficial and value added for their organizations at any given moment in time that they would swear by. But I just haven't, at this point in my career, I haven't had that experience yet.
Yeah, that's fair. All good.
Let me, if you don't mind, let me bounce that question back to you quick. I might be curious to hear what you have to say.
There are a couple of apps that I absolutely love. One is Cirrus Insight. So for those who are not familiar with Cirrus Insight, it gives you the power of an access to your entire Salesforce database from within your inbox. So I personally use Gmail. So if I receive an email from a prospect or a client, on the right-hand side, I have a panel to see whether or not, if that person is already in Salesforce. So similar to, in this regard, it's similar to the native Salesforce for Outlook side panel. But it's far more powerful, in my opinion, way more powerful. So I can see whether or not that person is already in Salesforce. B, if that person is not already in Salesforce, I can just click a button. It will essentially scrape the information that it found in the email header and the signature line of the email in order to pre-populate the fields for first name, last name, job title, company name, phone number, cell phone number, mailing address, etc. If that person already exists in Salesforce, I will have access to see all of the information that I have regarding that person, all related records, and it will allow me to go ahead and create records, Salesforce records from within my Gmail screen without leaving my Gmail screen. So, for example, someone sends me an email, client sends me an email, and they say, oh, by the way, can you follow up with Susan on my team tomorrow or next week? She's out of the office, follow up with her next week about X, Y, and Z. Without leaving my inbox, I can go ahead and maybe even create that contact record for Susan. I've never interacted with Susan before. Create the follow-up task or maybe a case that relates to Susan, assign it to someone else on my team, all without leaving my inbox. So to me, that's incredibly powerful. Two other things.
This sounds like it has. It has integration capabilities with Gmail. Does it also have integration capabilities with Outlook?
Yes, absolutely.
Microsoft Exchange. Okay.
Yep. So I can include a link to Cirrus Insight in the show notes. So that's just one part of Cirrus Insight. And if that were not enough, I sound like I'm doing a commercial for them. If that were not enough. So when replying, so we could forget about the side panel for a moment, make believe the side panel doesn't even exist. When replying to an email or initiating a new email from either Gmail or Outlook, so again, I'm using Gmail for this, I have access to all of the communication email templates that are in Salesforce. I have access to them from within Gmail. So I can click a button to call up my entire library of email templates, which I use heavily. To me, this is one of my favorite features of Salesforce because it's so rudimentary, so simple from a technology perspective, yet so powerful on a day-to-day efficiency perspective to use email templates. So let's say, for example, following up with a client regarding an enhancement that they asked for, and I have templates either confirming here are the requirements that we've gotten, or here's an update on the status, or just seeking clarification or approval on X, Y, and Z, or confirmation that it was completed. So from within my inbox, I can access all of those templates, Salesforce templates, and it will automatically populate the subject line, the body of the email, while also merging in all of the appropriate details coming directly from Salesforce. And again, without leaving my inbox screen.
So I'm just conceptualizing this in my mind, so thinking out loud. So when you're managing a customer account, client, what have you, in Salesforce, obviously if you scroll down to the related list activity history, you can send an email and based on the email templates that are have that radio button active clicked, you can select that and send an email through Salesforce to that particular account or client or customer. What you're saying now is if you're in your Gmail, so acting independently of Salesforce, and there's a client or customer you want to reach out to, you can still tap into those email templates?
Yep. And while merging in the native Salesforce data regarding any particular record.
Okay, so how do you, I'm going to write that down now. CIRRUS?
Yes, Cirrus Insight, CIRRUS Insight. So the templates feature to me is comes second in terms of the best, one of the top reasons why I love Cirrus Insight. The next one is when it comes to setting up meetings. So actually, you probably noticed when I coordinated with you to set up this podcast. So it gives you
I meant to follow up with you on that.
So I refer to that as the Chinese menu. So everyone knows what it's like when you're going back and forth. You're trying to set up a meeting with someone during a time slot that's mutually beneficial. And typically what happens is, well, does Tuesday work for you at 2 p.m.? Well, no, Tuesday doesn't work for me at 2 p.m., but I could do Wednesday before 9. Does that work for you? So Cirrus Insight has this feature baked in where for me as the person who's utilizing Cirrus Insight, I can select basically the feature, the icon says something like book a meeting. I can immediately see while I'm drafting the email, I can see my calendar and I can choose windows of time that work for me on my calendar. I can also set the duration of the meeting. So it's 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it might be. And once I select those windows of time for availability, I basically hit a button and then it populates what I referred to earlier as that Chinese menu by populating in the body of the email, let's say Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, here are the different time slots that work. And it allows the recipient of the email to simply select whichever time slot is most beneficial to them. And it automatically creates the calendar entry. It automatically sends them a confirmation meeting request for them to accept. So it's now on both of our calendars, and of course it's in Salesforce all at the same time.
Yeah, no, I did notice that, and I thought that was pretty interesting just because, with Outlook and its capabilities within an organization, you have the ability, permission is still a caveat, but you have the ability to see one's calendar, and you can isolate different dates, times down that work, just because you're all within the same exchange, right? Same organization. But what I struggle with is, I was just needing to meet with Phil Dixon, CXO or CEO of Zenbit, and he's external. So he puts the time on my calendar. I propose back. He proposes back. And what ends up happening, David, is the level of priority associated with playing that tag game kind of takes those kind of, meeting invites and migrates them into a realm of irrelevancy. Kind of. It sounds negative, but essentially it's just, I'll get to this when I can get to this. There's a couple other things I got to get to. But having a palette or Chinese menu, if you have indicated, of here are the available times, you get to knock it out in one swing. I like that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you also what often happens is the recipient looks at it and they say, okay, that's cool. He just gave me all of these options to choose from. Then for whatever reason, and I don't take it personally in the slightest, they deprioritize the response. So they're just sitting and waiting to choose a time. But in the meantime, if during the course of the day, I'm getting 8 or 10 different requests like this, and I'm offering overlapping time slots to multiple people, it's first come, first serve. So if one client books a particular time slot, and then a second later, another recipient of an email chooses the exact same time slot, they get an immediate response saying, sorry, that time's not available. Go pick another time.
Yeah, first come, first serve.
Yeah. So it eliminates a lot of the back and forth.
we'll both recall from, or anyone listening will recall from one of the most infamous Seinfeld episodes, No Soup for You.
Yes, no soup for you. So Cirrus Insight is my probably my top favorite. I'll say what comes second. There are actually quite a few that I speak enthusiastically about. I would say probably Evernote would come second. So I'm a huge fan of Evernote.
Yeah.
And when I was first introduced to the concept of integrating Evernote with Salesforce, I was completely perplexed. I laughed it off and I said, that is absolutely ridiculous. Evernote, by definition, is all about unstructured data. You could have images and sound clips and videos and handwritten notes that you take a picture of. You could have text and stuff from websites and emails. And on the flip side, Salesforce, like any database, it's about structured data. So I thought it was ridiculous because I figured someone is going to, at some point, going to expect to be able to pull reports of their Evernote notes, but in Salesforce. And clearly that won't be possible. So what is the value in having Evernote integrated with Salesforce? Well, I've come around in a big way. So what I love about the Evernote Salesforce integration is, suppose I'm working with a particular client on a Salesforce project, and very often I personally maybe am just showing my age, which I'm cool with that anyway, but as much as I'm a technology geek, when I'm in an in-person face-to-face meeting, I typically prefer to take notes, handwritten notes on a piece of paper. And that's my style. That's how I roll. And so what I typically do is
by the way, that's my style as well.
See that? So I can consider myself like a millennial then.
You could. There's something to be said about listening and writing notes down on a paper that stimulates something cognitively in which you're retaining that information, right?
100%. I definitely remember it better when I'm writing it down versus just typing. So I'll take the handwritten notes, and sometimes I might be even scribbling a diagram of maybe their workflow, their process. And when doing that, at the end of the meeting, no matter how many pages I've written on paper, I take up my phone, where I have the Evernote app on there. I will snap pictures of my handwritten notes. I can then take the papers that I took notes on and shred them for all practical purposes. So I'm saving the handwritten notes now in Evernote. And back in Salesforce, I can link those handwritten notes either with the contact, with the account, with the opportunity, with the case, whatever type of record it relates to. And then I, or anyone on my team who needs to see those unstructured notes, can see them in Salesforce through the Evernote integration. On top of that, because Evernote does hand recognition of the text, so I can then, or anyone on the team can then search in Evernote for any words that might appear even in my handwriting from the in-person meeting. And so to me, that's incredibly powerful stuff.
No, that's good stuff. Yeah, that's great.
So I'm a huge, huge fan of Evernote. All right. So if you could, next question to you is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's relatively new to the world of Salesforce, what advice would you give them and why?
Well, I think my advice would probably be multiple tiered, and what it would be is, one, don't take as much time not getting involved in the community as it took me, meaning I wish I would have gotten involved in the community much earlier on, because obviously I was aware of the success community. I was aware of different training mechanisms like Trailhead, and obviously from there I would, meet different members that make up the community. So I would say get involved in the community, find what admin.stories.com refers to as an admin hero. Just because that's an individual that in a lot of different ways will act as a mentor capacity. They can be the nexus between you and meeting other members within the community. They can help you out in your journey. I know a recent example, Zachary Jeans connected an individual, a lady, I can't recall her name. If you're listening, please forgive me, with the Minnesota Salesforce admin, developers, evangelists, because she was local to this area. So from there, she immediately got to connect with us and collaborate with us. So yeah, learn from the community, get involved, and from a training perspective, one of the things I know David, you and Brainy are big on is training.
Yep.
So find different methods and ways to be trained. It doesn't have to be a formal process of going, and not taking anything away from Salesforce use amazing training curriculum and delivery approach, both virtually and in the classroom. But there's a lot of different available mechanisms out there for you to learn the platform declaratively, efficiently, and on your time. So whether that's Trailhead, whether that's reading through blog posts, David, you're pretty active on that. Jen Lee's pretty active with blog posts. You're going to learn a significant amount. And as we think about being new to the admin, being new to the ecosystem, we have to embrace the fact that there's going to be 3 major releases a year. And that's just kind of Salesforce's way of saying, I hear you via the idea exchange, and here's what we're doing about it. Through those major releases, there's going to be new features, new capabilities, and a lot of those features and capabilities are going to be captured in these different blog posts or Trailhead modules. So that is going to be what separates you from banging your head against the wall, like I did early on in my career, and being what's referred to in the Salesforce ecosystem as an awesome admin. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
That's awesome.
On that.
Fantastic advice. Definitely sage advice for people who are new and overwhelmed to the Salesforce platform.
And by the way, David, I don't know if you know, but when I did the admin.salesforce My Stories interview, I think there's like 6 or 7 Shauna's on there. Davina is on there. There's Stan Jason's on there. I'm just trying to think. Amy, I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name, is on there. But the point is one of the questions Jillian asked is, what is your favorite feature?
Right.
What's something fun fact about you? But then to my earlier point, who was your admin hero? I actually have you listed on there.
Thank you.
My admin hero. I don't know if you ever got to see that, but
yes, I did. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyways.
Good stuff. So.
Yeah.
Tell me, Justice, you mentioned to me that you are starting to plan out your own podcast with a group of people. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So
what's that all
those
about?
listening, yeah, absolutely. To those listening, you're going to want to be very excited for what's to come here in the near future. So not that long ago, Salesforce Community's very own Hamza Abid wrote a phenomenal article, and it was published, and it got a lot of attention from various individuals, both in the Salesforce employee space and both from the what Salesforce would refer to as customers space. And the article really talked about, and I won't go into too many details because obviously Hamza wrote the article, and I'm just paraphrasing, so I don't want to extract the real value of what he was trying to get at. But what he had mentioned on there, the title of the post was Salesforce less than 2%, and that number was basically telling a story on what the specific metric was for African minorities, specifically blacks, that were employed at Salesforce.com. And he goes further in his article in talking about diversity and inclusion, the importance of it, how this is a clear opportunity for corporations to not be capitalizing on the significance that could come from diversity and inclusion, right? Diversity in experiences, Diversity in skill set provides a different way of approaching similar challenges and problems, right? That's how you go from conventional to non-conventional thinking, if you were to break it down from that perspective. But so that was a great article, and it resonated with everyone who read it or heard of it. And fast forward to Dreamforce 16, he had wrote the article prior to, obviously. Fast forward to Dreamforce 16, a number of us met up for dinner, I believe it was. So Hamza was there, Brandon, B. Jones, just a number of us, Toya, Shana, Lakia, just a number of us within the community just met up just to, this was the one conference where, if we were granted the opportunity through our employer or we had the means to make it, this would be the one conference where a lot of us, not just minorities, but a lot of us would have an opportunity to meet, collaborate, connect, network. So it's very important that, when you have a Hamza Adib traveling from London or whoever's traveling from anywhere on the globe, that, you take the opportunity to meet up, connect, get to put a name to a face.
Absolutely.
So we met up, and a number of us. And after the Dreamforce 16 experience, I felt compelled to kind of keep the dialogue going. We just had such a great organic conversation that you just knew great things would come from the individuals that were sitting at that dinner table. So I started a Twitter group within Twitter, and I called it Salesforce Less Than 2%. I invited a few people. Shauna was one of them. Toya was another. Hamza, a few other people. And my intent here was, obviously the article was surrounded around Salesforce.com employees, but what I was trying to capture here is how can we capture a voice, a collective voice that came together on its own through relationships to be a part of the Salesforce Less Than 2% group that represented the minority, blacks, if you will, or admin developers that were in the community. So that group started to grow and grew more and more. And it's not just blacks. Yes, Selena Suarez, that's a part of that group. I know she works closely with you. And we just really started connecting and vibing and bouncing off of each other and supporting each other. You might have seen, I was recently in Chicago, and I met up with Ruby, who's based out of Chicago, and she's a co-user group leader for the Chicago user group for Salesforce. She brought me around, brought me to neighborhoods. She drove me everywhere. She brought me to museums. She really took me to brunch. So I really felt like I was with family, right? So Hamza posted recently and said, hey, I'm thinking of this really crazy idea. How about we start a podcast? So we came up with a few different names for what that podcast would be. And we're in the beginning stages. So a lot of things are still TBD, but we're in the beginning stages of getting this podcast launched. The title of the podcast is going to be The Change Sets.
Cute pun.
So we tried to be very creative. Yeah. We tried to keep the name of the podcast to be related to the Salesforce platform, but in the same breath to tell a story or demonstrate the level of impact even a minority voice or a minority group of individuals may have on a platform or an ecosystem. So what you can expect is a very comfortable, very organic, very loose, very light, knowledgeable, highly experienced subject matter experts from different portions of the globe that are coming together to have a very real and authentic conversation about all things we find passion, obviously, with Salesforce being the centric point of our conversation. So yeah, TBD on that, but that's going to be exciting. And we have a lot of influential thought leaders within this group, David, that I think are going to really be a great voice and beacon for those who are listening on the podcast. And one of the other things I might want to mention is I recently updated the podcast from Salesforce. Not the podcast, the Twitter group, from Salesforce less than 2% to Salesforce less than 3%. And I think there's something to be said about, Hamza wrote a great article, and if we were to look at, Mark Benioff and the things he has done, whether it was directly inspired by Hamza's article or it was inspired by individuals that came to Mark and his leadership team. He wrote the article at one point in time. Fast forward to today, you have an entire Office of Equality. You have Tony Profit, recent Microsoft executive, well-tenured, well-experienced, well-respected, now leading that Office of Equality as the Chief Equality Officer. So I think from that, he's done a number of things with appointing different individuals, different silos for different focus areas around LGBTQ. And I think what that's doing is it's saying, okay, not only is Salesforce the fourth largest software company in the world, but we're a company and organization that cares about diversity and cares so much about it that we're actually doing something about it, which I think those actions have directly taken that number from less than 2% to less than 3%. Now that's a small incremental change, but it's one. I tell my son all the time, one step at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. So I'm glad. I'm excited. Looking forward to it, and more to come on that.
And I am looking forward to the launch of the podcast and to learn from the wisdom that's shared on it. And I'm sure that there will be lots of entertaining and insightful pieces of information that are shared within the podcast. So that is great stuff, and I'm eager to see the launch of it and to see it grow. That's always cool. Watching a new initiative that just springs up from one or multiple people's, a brainstorming, a collaborative idea, and just watching it grow, watching it take on a life of its own. That's always cool.
Yeah, I'm especially, to your point, I'm especially excited that, the approach we've all agreed on, and again, this is not a one-person effort or dictatorship in any means. This is really a collective group coming together to support the same cause. But I think the whole point, David, of being on a podcast, you have numerous individuals cutting each other off, laughing, whatever. I think that whole element of that podcast is what I'm especially excited for.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's not going to be all bantering. There's going to be lots of good, fruitful, insightful conversation, shared perspectives on a lot of different things.
I have no doubt
in our industry. Yeah. It's good.
Great stuff.
Thanks.
Great. Justice, thank you for being on this podcast. I have no doubt that my listeners will find your insights and wisdom incredibly valuable. And I am looking forward to watching your continued success within the community, within your career. And I look forward to having you back again on the podcast at some time in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. Thanks, David, for having me. I enjoyed this conversation and dialogue.
Yep.
Hope to be back on at some point in time again in the future.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Brainy 8 Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to any resources referenced in this podcast. Also, don't forget to head over to brainy8.com to subscribe to the Brainy 8 blog, where I regularly share Salesforce-related tips and tricks to help you become a Salesforce rockstar.